Okay, at this point, you might be saying, lady, you keep talking about healing. What are you even talking about? What kind of healing do these men need? Well, I need to talk about some stuff about the healing so it makes more sense. What are some of the things that people suffer who've been involved with abortion? A lot of times the women who've actually been in the clinics are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is really bad. It messes up your head, and you experience things beyond what should be normal. And you need God to help you and bring you back to wholeness. Here are three of the biggies I want to talk about. Grief, shame, and anger. A lot of men are dealing with anger, and when the men help other men heal, that's an area they work on a lot. I think in women, one of the big areas might be depression, but it shows more like anger in the men. So I wish I had more personal testimonies to help you with anger, but that is something you can work on with the guys. But let me just give you one example. A lot of men are angry because maybe the girl's mother or grandmother ganged up on him and said, "Forget you, you're a punky 16-year-old boy, and this baby's not coming on this earth," So or the woman won't even tell the man she was pregnant, or she'll just say, "This doesn't involve you, get away." So a lot of men feel anger about that. A lot of men are angry at themselves. So it's a big thing, but it's not so big God can't speak to it and heal it. Now, shame and grief, they're two really big ones. One of the interesting stories about my healing journey was I didn't have a lot of shame. I didn't have a lot of shame because my grief was so tremendous that it trumped the shame. So I didn't care what you thought about me. I wasn't embarrassed in my story because how you judged me couldn't even compare to the pain I was feeling for having lost my child. So that's one interesting thing about my story. A lot of women that are friends of mine, the shame was about to kill them. But because grief in my life trumped shame, that makes me the lady making this movie. Okay, I want to talk about grief a lot because it's a big thing. Grief is an interesting topic in general. And if you get some healing group going at your church, you might run into an interesting thing. People have all these opinions about grief. And you might run into people that think that grieving is sin. Sometimes grieving and sin can walk together. Sin can be friends and walk with anybody. Sin can be combined along with anybody. But if you are grieving and you're sinning and you're grieving, like you're grieving, you go, now I'm going to live unhealthy and go have 5 dangerous affairs and try to secretly kill myself through hooking up with abusers, then your sin is attached to your grief. So in your healing group, you're going to try to divide the sin out from the grief. Now, in my group of women that we were healing with each other, we had to challenge each other. And we would say, Susie, are you grieving in a healthy way? Because let me tell you, there are 10,000 ways you want to grieve in an unhealthy way. Hurt yourself, eating disorders. Grief, if it's not dealt with and pushed through and healed, will leave you stuck in some really dangerous, unhealthy places. So we were always challenging each other. Now, are you grieving in a healthy way? So back to the people that, the unusual people you'll run into when you're dealing with grief as a topic. There are some people, and it might be some of the people that think all grief is sin. I mean, you need to get over this, and you're just maudlin, and you're just wallowing in your grief. That's sin. Now shut up and get over your abortion and move on. Sometimes these people, we need to be bigger than that and have a heart of compassion for these people that seem so hard. Because I have found that grief is really terrifying to some people. And it makes them feel nervous and undone, and they don't like people crying, and it makes them panicky. So they want you to just shut up with all your grief and crying and get away from them, because it puts fear in them. So you'll run into people that are so terrified of grief that they just can't even go there. So let's say you wanted to do some kind of healing group in your church. You could add, and I think people that know they can deal with grief know they can deal with grief. It's like my friend that had that prophetic word that she would wade out to the deep water in her long legs, and she would pull out the people that were drowning. She knew she could go out there to the dark places. She knew she was called out to those people that were in really deep, dark spots. I believe that somebody could stand in front of a whole congregation and say, who in here knows that they are called to minister to the grieving and has the guts to do it? And I think the people know who they are, and there'll be a small percentage of people that will raise their hands. They'll surprise you, but they're there. And they know they can go, and they can sit with people who are weeping. These would be good candidates for ministry. For the people that are terrified of grief, you don't have to be mean to them. They have other callings. They have other things they're good at. So we don't need to judge them. But just be aware that grief can make a lot of people really uncomfortable, and they just can't go there. So let's see. I'll just tell you a little interesting story. Even people post-abortive people who are really a mess and they want to be healed, even they can't go and look at all that grief sometimes. Even they don't want to open up that wound. So they can be actually terrified to go into healing, but they're so broken and desperate they have to go to healing, but you're still dealing with all this fear on them. So I went to this conference one time, and I met these two really cool girls. They were like this Bible study team. I think they were from Georgia. I think they were really pretty blondes, both of them. And anyway, I think they were Presbyterians from Georgia. And we were sharing with how we minister, and these two blondes, they had it together, and they said, this is what we tell women when they're all terrified and they're getting ready to come to our ministry for healing. And the first one says, we tell them, we're going to take you on this journey, and it's going to be like a hike, and parts of it might be scary and rocky, but we're going to pull you through. We've been on this journey before ourselves, and we ain't going to leave you there in a bad place. We're going to take you all the way through the hike and get you to the other side. And the other girl goes, yeah, that's what we do. And I'm sure that was comforting to people coming into their ministry who are like, man, do I want to open up this whole wound in myself? Do I trust these people to heal me, to help me get to the other side of grief, which can keep you stuck and kill you gradually? So anyway, I wanted to share that about those two girls. Another thing that is interesting about grief, if you're trying to heal post-abortive people, and it's on the topic of why this is a hard ministry, why ministering to the post-abortive people is a messy and challenging ministry in regards to grief. Okay, let's say your grandmother died and you loved her, and she was your favorite grandmother. Well, you have to go forward in your life, and in your life you're missing your grandmother. You think back to the fun times, back when you were a little kid. You're reviewing back behind yourself before your grandmother died, how she made that pie, how she comforted you, how you miss her. You're going back to someone's life who was, usually a full life. Post-abortive people have this weird grieving that sits in front of them. They have a loss of a person that didn't live on the earth. So the post-abortive person has to go forward in their life, and before them everywhere they go is this grief. The grief of then, how old would my baby be today? Would I be a grandfather today? And the Lord is so generous, and through healing, He can help you deal with this awkward grief that's a forward grief that's in front of you instead of behind you when you're grieving someone who lived on the earth and you're missing them. So that's just one of those other tricky things that the Lord has to help you do. So let's see. Um, so we're talking about shame and anger, post-traumatic stress disorder, grief. Um, I love the weird combinations of things. You got these people that turn into passive zombies because they're in so much pain, and then the next day they're having a panic attack. So they're like dead, but they're panicking and alive and suffering. So I put this panic attack zombie on there just to represent all the weird forms of brokenness you can have. So when I'm talking about healing, these are some of the things I'm talking about.